Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why babies start out with those funny grunts and squeals, sounds that seem so different from the words we use? Well, a fascinating new paper might have an amazing explanation. It turns out the story isn't just about learning sounds from grown-ups, but about how a baby's own body is changing and how exploration plays a huge role. This research dives into why infants worldwide seem to go through similar stages of vocal development, starting with sounds like growls, grunts, and squeals. The big idea here is that it is not just about imitating parents, but about the physical development of a baby's vocal tract. Think of it like building blocks, where each new anatomical change opens up new sound possibilities for the baby to discover. So, why these early sounds? The paper suggests that the organizing force is the changing shape of the baby's vocal tract as they grow. It's like a natural set of building blocks that guide what sounds are possible. The infant isn't trying to make a specific sound from the start, but their body structure naturally leads them to certain acoustic events through simple exploration. The researchers explained that this sequence of sounds you hear from babies' growls, squeals, then later raspberries, trills, and babbling follows a pretty consistent pattern across different languages and cultures. This suggests that something internal is at play, something related to how their bodies are maturing. They propose that the changing geometry of the vocal tract is the key. As the anatomy changes, it reveals new acoustic possibilities that the baby then stumbles upon through their own explorations. Let's start with the lower part of the vocal tract, what they call the Pharyngeal-Laryngeal Complex. This is from the back of the mouth down to the vocal folds, the part that makes your voice vibrate. In newborns, this area is very compact, sort of squished. The voice box, or larynx, is high up. And the epiglottis, a flap that covers your windpipe, is close to the soft palate. This setup is great for feeding and protecting the airway, but it limits vocal variation. When the hyoid bone, which supports the larynx, moves, it pulls the larynx down too. Everything is tightly linked. Because everything is so bundled together, when a baby moves their tongue to suck, it can also affect the larynx, disrupting a steady voice sound. Also, the baby's nose is often connected to the airway, making early sounds sound a bit muffled and nasal, with wide sound frequencies. This geometric reality, not language input, is why very young babies everywhere tend to make similar grunts and whimpers. The larynx itself is also key. In newborns, a large part of the vocal folds are cartilage, and the vibrating part is small. Plus, their lungs are smaller and their breathing control isn't fully developed. This means even small changes in breathing or tension can easily push the vocal system into different modes, producing those growls. Squeals and creaky sounds. It is like a sensitive instrument where small nudges produce big changes. Tissue properties in the immature larynx also make it easier to transition between these different sound modes. This is where the exploration part really comes in. It's like how babies kick their legs not because they're planning to walk, but because the body's mechanics make those movements happen, and the baby feels and learns from those movements. Similarly, babies make sounds, and the sensory feedback what they hear and feel draws them back to those actions. Producing a clear sound effect is rewarding in itself. Through repetition, these motor sound connections become habits. The sounds they make, like grunts, initially might be tied to physical effort. But as the baby explores and notices the social effects of these sounds, like getting a caregiver's attention, they start using them more intentionally. It is not about learning new anatomy, but about learning to use the anatomy they have in more communicative ways. For example, grunts might start as reflexes but evolve into social bids. Now let's look at the tongue and mouth. In newborns, the mouth is small and the tongue fills it. The tongue's muscles are arranged in a way that makes it really good for sucking but not for varied speech sounds. The muscle fibers mostly run horizontally, guiding the tongue to move mainly forward and backward. The part of the tongue near the root, which in adults helps shape vowels, is underdeveloped. The tongue base actually sits very close to the epiglottis. This means early tongue movements lead to a very limited range of sounds. The mouth shape doesn't change much, so the early vowel-like sounds are all clustered together. Gravity also plays a role. When a baby is lying down, the tongue might naturally rest in a way that creates a constriction at the back of the mouth, leading to sounds like guttural clicks or constrictions. These happen before the baby has fine control over their tongue. But as the baby grows, especially during the first year, things change. The hyoid bone lowers, the pharynx, the throat gets longer, and the roof of the mouth, the palate, deepens. This gives the tongue much more room and flexibility to move up, down, and sideways. New dimensions of acoustic variation become possible. This anatomical shift explains why certain sounds appear earlier than others. Sounds made with the front of the tongue, like those at the alveolar ridge, become possible earlier because the front of the tongue gains independent movement first. Sounds made with the back of the tongue, which need more space created by the deeping palate, come later. This anatomical sequence helps explain why Across languages, certain consonant sounds tend to appear before others. Again, it's the infant's exploration that turns these new anatomical possibilities into actual sounds. They discover these new movements, feel the sounds they make, and repeat them until they become stable. It is a process of discovering, stabilizing, and differentiating. The key idea here is that each stage of anatomical development resets the learning process. As new degrees of freedom open up, the baby goes through a phase of high variability in their sounds and then gradually stabilizes new patterns. It is like learning to walk all over again with each new physical capability. What is really interesting is that the sounds a baby masters through their own vocal exploration act like a filter for understanding language. The sounds they can easily make become the sounds they're more likely to notice and learn in their caregiver's speech. So, vocal practice does two things. It builds reliable motor skills and tunes their hearing to those sounds. Now let's talk about the lips and jaw from birth. Babies have functional lips and jaws, but these parts are initially focused entirely on the demands of suckling, a tight lip seal, rhythmic jaw movements, and tongue contact. Sounds like clicks and smacks during feeding are incidental side effects of this suckling mechanism. As the baby grows, these lip and jaw movements start to happen outside of feeding. This is when sounds like raspberries, which involve fluttering lips and air, begin to appear. It likely takes a bit of time for respiratory control to develop enough to sustain the air pressure needed for raspberries. Around the same time, babies also start exploring jaw movements independently, making repetitive jaw cycles without any sound. So, the baby is exploring different parts separately. Jaw movements without voice, lip sounds without jaw or voice involvement, and voice sounds without much shaping by the lips or jaw. This happens because coordinating these different parts is tricky at first. For instance, moving the jaw can disrupt a steady voice sound, making it hard to combine them reliably early on. It is not just about the voice. Think about reaching with your hands. Babies first move both arms together symmetrically. Later, they learn to coordinate one hand to hold something while the other manipulates it. This transition from separate actions to coordinated ones happens as they discover which combinations produce reliable and interesting results. In vocal development, this leads to canonical babbling, the recognizable baba or mama sounds. This happens when a lip movement, like closing the lips, is timed with a laryngeal voice sound. This combination creates something new, a clear consonant and a vowel sound that neither part makes on its own. These novel sensory outcomes draw the baby back to repeat and stabilize this new skill. Sounds like labial stops, made with the lips, are often among the first consonant, like sounds babies produce because they require relatively simple coordination. Lips close, pressure builds, lips open, and the voice sound follows. Initially, the timing between the lip movement and the voice might be a bit off, but with repetition, it tightens up into the rhythmic sequences of babbling. The researchers also mentioned that those silent jaw movements you might see in babies are similar to other rhythmic movements babies do, called rhythmic stereotypies. They happen when a baby is mastering a new movement. In vocal development, the jaw might be cycling rhythmically on its own, and babbling occurs when this existing rhythm gets captured by the voice. It's important to note that most of this vocal exploration happens even when babies are alone, not interacting with anyone. This shows that their motivation comes from within, from the sheer joy of exploring what sounds their bodies can make, and the sensations that come with it. Naturally, social interaction and caregiver responses can boost this process, making it happen faster or more efficiently. And as we touched on earlier, when babies start learning their first words, they tend to use words that sound similar to the babbling they've already mastered. This reinforces that what carries over from one stage to the next isn't a general skill, but the specific sound patterns they've solidified within their current physical capabilities. So, putting it all together, this research paints a really compelling picture. The consistent stages of infant vocal development aren't just about learning language, but about the predictable ways a baby's vocal tract changes. As the anatomy evolves, it makes certain sound possibilities more accessible. The infant, through undirected exploration, discovers these possibilities. They repeat the motor actions that create noticeable sounds. And through this repetition, they stabilize those sounds into their repertoire. This means each anatomical configuration opens up a new set of degrees of freedom, new ways to move and make sounds. The infant explores these, stabilizes some, and then moves on. It's a stepwise accumulation of skills, each tied to a particular stage of physical development. The researchers also connect this to how culture works. They suggest that babies naturally generate these simple, low-cost sound patterns through exploration, and then caregivers and the broader community help ratchet these into the specific, more complex phonological and prosodic systems of a particular language. In essence, vocal development is a journey of anatomical revelation. As the the body transforms, it unlocks what was previously hidden, and the infant's own natural curiosity and exploration are the engine that turns these physical revelations into meaningful communication. It's a beautiful interplay between biology and behavior. I'm really intrigued by this idea that our bodies are, in a way, pre-programmed to discover certain sounds at certain times. It highlights how deeply our physical form shapes our abilities and our development. It makes you wonder about other developmental processes. Are there similar anatomical affordances that guide how babies learn to walk or grasp objects? Or even how we as adults develop more complex cognitive skills? This research does have some areas where we could ask more questions. While it beautifully explains the why behind the what of early vocalizations, it doesn't delve deeply into the specific neurological mechanisms that drive this constant exploration and stabilization beyond mentioning dopamine's role. Also, while it emphasizes individual variation in exploration, future studies could further explore how specific environmental or caregiver interactions might influence which sounds get stabilized more than others, even within a given anatomical configuration. But overall, this paper offers a powerful new lens through which to view infant vocal development. It moves beyond the simple imitation model to a more dynamic, embodied perspective, where the infant's own body and its explorations are central. It's a great reminder that learning is not just about input, but about the amazing way our physical selves enable and guide our journey of discovery. So what do you think about these findings? Does it change how you see babies and their early sounds? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the science of baby sounds, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to Rubin's Mind Lab for more fascinating research explained, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.